You're here, which means that you've found spirit crumbs, leading you to your inner light worker. I will be sharing how these tiny little hints from the universe have led me to where I am today. I hope that by hearing my story and the stories of others, you'll pick up your own spirit crumbs along the way that will lead you to somewhere magical. Thanks for coming along for the journey. Let's see where it takes us. Hello, I'm Andrea from Concrete and Crystals and Spirit Crumbs.
And I'm Emily from Emily and Her Stars and Things That Make You Go Wow.
You're not going to believe this, but we are back here to talk about Gaining Light, our 6-month forecast from January to June in 2026 already.
This is something I've been looking forward to. I think we started talking about recording this in November because, as any astrologer who's even looked at the stars ahead of time has looked at 2026 with really big eyes. And there's a feeling of like 2025. What was that? Let's just start there before we even head into 26.
I don't know what it was, but it was wild. I feel like the world around us has been revealing a lot. We've had a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of tension in the world. And I think, like, on a collective and personal note, I'm like ready for whatever's coming. I'm at that point where, as we know, I'm always like, bring on the tower moment. Let's get this changing. And I feel like I'm going to regret saying that by the end of 2026.
I think there was a collective moment a year ago, right about now, of shock. We were like, what just happened? This is not how things were supposed to go. And I remember so many of us were talking about how we had all woken up at like 3 a.m. on the night of the elections with like this huge, overwhelming sense of calm. And we're like, how can anyone be calm? And there was so many unknowns. We were like, okay, there's going to be things in place that are going to help. There's going to be systems and checks and balances. And as 2025 progressed, we were like, where are they? Who's coming to save us? Where's someone come fix it? Which is such a Neptune and Pisces feeling of like this victim and like waiting for a superhero or waiting for that one person to swoop in and change everything. And I mean, 2025 clearly showed us that that is not the case. No one is coming. There were a few pockets and moments when Neptune moved into Aries just briefly. We had a preview of that. And of course, the mayor in New York changed, and we had some big, exciting changes. But that being said, we've retrograded back. It's like we got all of this preview energy, but then everything slipped back into old patterns. And so I think, if anything, I would call 2025 stale. It felt like stale bread, stale chips, like nothing really had any glimmer. And I think back to the last time we recorded just after summer solstice or just before, and we were thinking, there's going to be a lot more change in the fall as signs kind of flip-flopped and changed back and forth. But it just felt like this continuation, this dragging on. And you and I were talking before we started recording about how lackluster December sort of felt. And I've described this to several people. It's like things didn't sparkle. The food didn't taste the same. The get-togethers were just a little like, meh. There was something about the energy of December that just didn't hit like it normally would.
Yeah, I think there is this collective energy of like us. It's like we're all in that in between where like we're waiting for the outward change to happen. And I think it's affecting us more than we realize. I think most years, maybe a couple people are struggling, but everyone else is really on a high. So you can kind of ride that high with them. But I think when everyone's sort of in the same boat where they're all waiting for something or there's something everybody's sort of hoping for, I think it's hard to lift everyone's spirits if everyone's in that same boat. So I think it's interesting. You talked about in the Capricorn episode, like we didn't have any retrogrades or anything. Like there's nothing to stop us from having a good time. So like that's the most interesting thing. It's like we can't really blame it on anything other than the energy around us, the circumstances around us. And I think it didn't have that certain energy that we usually expect for the holidays.
And I think too, with so many outer planets, we talk so much in astrology about like Pluto and Uranus and even Neptune to some extent being kind of markers of generations because they take anywhere between 30 and 7 years to move through something. So these are longer periods of time. It's a slower burn. But generally when it moves, you like you said, you're impacting, you know, 2/12, 1/6 of the whole pie chart, right? Where it's the sign that the planet is moving into and its opposite that's really getting affected. It can sometimes trigger some squares to the others, but that's not the whole population. But when we've got so much change, flipping and flopping and in and out, and these huge pivotal moments that we're still building back up to, everybody feels like we're on the precipice. We know we're on the cusp of something, and there's this collective, like, inhale as we're waiting for it to happen, but then it hasn't happened, and so it just feels sticky and frustrating, and I think we're all in this headspace of, like, I'm trying to manifest something, but we're all getting the message to, like, simplify and keep it simple and pull back and not get scattered in so many directions that somehow yeah, there's a that that holiday, that Sagittarius spirit that can be so all over the place and exciting and kind of bursting at the seams. It just didn't have, yeah, the same punch this year. It's been interesting. We did have Chiron in retrograde through the holidays, and it's in the end degrees of Aries, so we're still healing some of those personal wounds around what we want, how we identify, what we're willing to sort of put up with in terms of how people see us. So I noticed a lot of families having people with maybe some more boundaries this year around what they were willing to withstand in terms of conversations or relationships or just how are we gonna move forward through 2026? It's gonna be very interesting. I'm dying to know what cards you got, but also I wanted to touch in briefly, not to take over the conversation, that when I look back to a year ago when we were predicting 2025, we knew there were gonna be some moments, and I think where I, as an astrologer, got overly excited is that I thought they would be more instantaneous. I thought there would be more instant gratification, that there would be these moments where something would come in and change. And I think that's the one thing I would say differently between last year and this year, that there is going to be massive amounts of change again this year. And I think it will be more action oriented versus inner oriented.
Yeah, I totally feel like there is a shift in that. I think even when I was looking at the cards compared to last year, it did seem like last year, even the cards were more like emotional, a little bit more internal, a little bit more reflective, as opposed to like moving forward. Although towards the end of the year, November was, I think, the wheel, and then December was the Knight of Swords, which typically is like movement. And I have started to feel that, like I have had more changes myself in the last couple months, but nothing that's overwhelmingly like, okay, we're in the new world now. It's sort of just like, okay, at least I know something's changing. But I think that also adds to that waiting feeling where you're like, okay, these things are changing, but like the car's here, we don't have an address. There's some movement happening, but I think we're just not quite there yet. So when I saw the cards for this year, I do genuinely, like what Emily was saying, I do feel like there's going to be a lot of change, but that we'll actually see it, like actions that will start to solidify it into being something new, as opposed to just a theoretical idea of something new.
It's funny. I like that conversation around the theoretical because we talked so many times last year, not only about being the year of the snake, being a year of endings, shedding these old patterns, which I think a lot of people really resonated with and felt. I think both you and I, for sure, in our own personal lives as well. And we talked a lot about the road trip, right? We were merging on the highway, things were picking up. We got stuck at the gas station in the middle of nowhere in the liminal for a while. And we were racing through that roundabout with no direction and we couldn't quite get out. And now, to me, it feels like December was the moment where we arrived, like in the middle of the night, exhausted. Everyone I've talked to has felt so tired, just drained, wiped out. And I also had this vision that Spirit gave me this morning when I was getting ready to record about how it feels like we've moved. Like this wasn't just a road trip. It's like we've literally moved to a new town. We don't know where the post office is. We don't know where the grocery store is. We have to figure out routes to get places. And very much that feels like the energy we're moving into. Everything's a little new, it's uncertain. It's almost like it takes extra energy, extra brain power to get through the day and to get through things because they just don't click like they used to.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And I think our brains are just overwhelmed because there's been so much around the theoretical and trying to think through things. Sometimes we just need to do something with our bodies and we need to be back in the real world, moving around, even if it's smaller actions. I think we'll all start to see like a collective movement. For me, I was thinking about this in terms of how I receive downloads and information. It's usually when I'm moving. I get a lot more when I'm just out for a walk doing something small. It's not destination necessarily, but I'm just out walking, putting myself in nature. This time of year, I'm not touching grass or anything, but I think there's something to be said about that shift that we are having. Like Emily said, it was a shedding year last year, it was a 9 year in numerology. And now we're in a 1 year. And there is that sort of liminal in between the 2 years where it crosses over. Almost like a Venn diagram. There's the 1 year when you're creating the new, but there's the in between of like, how do I get from point A to point B? What is the piece that I need to figure out? And I think that's where we're all kind of different. We all know that we're going from something to something. For some people, it's more of a mindset shift that they need to have. For some people, it's, more logical, like where am I going to find the money for this? Who do I need to connect with? I think we all have a different missing piece to get from point A to point B. And that's why we're all sort of circling around. But I think this is the time frame, the next few months, when we actually start to see that and start to recognize what it is we need. It does require some reflection backwards. Like I can see this as being like this Venn diagram where it's like we need to go back through the loop a little bit and then move back forward with that new reflection or that new realization. We don't have all the pieces to start building it yet.
One thing I thought was so interesting culturally is I noticed how many people really celebrated solstice this year, and people that aren't necessarily in the woo or in this traditional spiritual circle. There was just a lot more awareness around that time frame and almost a disconnect in some way from the turn of the year. From, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, it was like I literally saw someone say, it's Thursday. Like, what are we all excited about? And I think there's a part of us that is recognizing that these patterns and things that we have relied on in some ways in traditional sense that marked the year, marked success. You get your winter or Christmas bonus at work. You celebrate and take time off at the new year. Like those very traditional markers seem to be fading in some way, which I think is a precursor to what we're going to experience even more as we move into 2026. And this feeling, talking about the one, I had the image of a unicycle or even a pogo stick and how, like, that's an incredible amount of personal balance. There's nothing around you except you and whatever the object is you're on. But once you find that inner balance, there's almost a feeling of you can't quite forget it. Like even riding a bike, but I like the idea of it being one-footed in some way. When we find our inner balance this year, it's going to be harder to throw us off. Now, that's not to say you're not going to fall skin and knee. There's going to be a steep learning curve. You don't learn to ride a unicycle in one weekend, maybe if you don't sleep or eat. But for most of us, it's going to take a little time. Once you have the momentum, and I think this is what's going to change it, we're going to see proof. We're going to see that, oh my God, I rode 10 feet on the unicycle. That means I can do it. I can do this again. Something that keeps us coming back and getting excited and willing to do it again. And we'll talk about, I think, the fire horse a little bit too. Of course, we aren't there yet. That comes in February with the Chinese New Year. But this idea of the horse, and is it wild? Is it running completely unharnessed, unburdened, and going wherever it wants? Or have you managed it? Have you broke the horse in some way? We talk when we train horses about breaking them. And I've always had a hard time with that because it's like you break their spirit. But there's also something about the horse that then trusts you and trusts that you're going to feed it and house it and give it the exercise that it needs and the care it desires. It's a frame of mind change that helps you understand that something else is coming in its place. And I think that's a huge part of 2026.
Yeah, I think that singular journey feels really important. I think there is something about the 1 year where you are kind of maybe almost feeling isolated because you are doing something new that other people aren't on that journey with you yet because you're not even 100% sure what the journey is. And it does feel a little bit lonely sometimes when you're starting out in a new cycle because I think in an established cycle, you have the people and the routines and everything connected to that like known familiar energy, which is why it's sometimes really hard to let go of something. Because something I mentioned in my newsletter for January was the fact that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to leave something that's not necessarily bad, that's still serving in some way, but you just know it's not helping you move forward or that it's taking up space that you know needs to change into something else. And I think that's part of why that one does feel lonely because you have to sometimes leave behind different connections or the connections have to change in order for you to start this new thing. And then you have to find the new people or new opportunities. And I think it can feel a little bit lonely if you're going off on your own little path. The vision that I have for that is like when you're in a big park or something and everyone's just going on the main path and you're like, I'm going to take this random route. And they're like, I don't know, going off in the woods alone seems a little risky. And you're like, well, I heard there's a really cool pond over here. And then you just go. And again, you might trip over some roots, you might have some stumbling blocks, but I think like then you get to that thing, you're like, I knew this was here. And then you're sending the location to all the other people and they eventually come. But I just feel like, yeah, there is something that, so I just wanted to put that awareness out there. I think that like it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're on the new path, you're in the new one energy, is going to feel great right away. I think there is still, like Emily said, a learning curve to it, and it can take a while before you start to make the connections and start to feel like solid and supported in it. But it is still important to take that leap. And I think we will be glad that we did once we see the other side or once we get that momentum going and we start to see like, oh my God, I was right about this. There's something about that feeling that just feels so good. And I think we're all ready for that again. So in order to do that, we do need to kind of take that leap and start moving in a new direction, even if it's just one tangible step at a time. Like we were saying, the action is really important this year and feeling in your body and feeling like you're doing something. So as long as you're taking some sort of action towards it, it doesn't have to be big. I think that's where it'll snowball and like more energy will come. The more energy you put into it, the more you'll see the evidence of like the pieces you need along the way. We've all been in this weird in between for a while, so I think we're all ready for that.
I love the imagery I was getting as you were talking was the idea of, being a wild horse or being on a wild horse and being solitary and alone and kind of just running across the plains and then recognizing that there's other horses running with you. And suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was alone in this. I thought I was doing this by myself and being brave, and I am, but there's others with me. Like the horses gather and they join force. And there's something about that energy, that collective strength that I think we're going to feel this year that we missed last year. I think in my own interpretation of the astrology, I really thought we would have more of that last year. But I think we've still got so much influence in Pisces, poor Neptune, and even Saturn hanging out there. It's this dissolving of togetherness, dissolving of the individual. And so we've all just kind of been looking to somebody else to bring the dreams into reality. And this is the moment, to me, 2026 is the Fool card. It is walking out on that ledge. I really hope you pulled it in the cards. I don't know, but it's walking out into the edge and just taking that first step and knowing that you have everything you need. And if you don't, you'll stop on the way and figure it out. But we have to take the jump. There's no more of this swimming in ambiguity and trying to figure it out alone.
Yeah, you know what? There's something about that energy of like us thinking someone else was going to do it first and we were just going to join in. So I need to be the one to start doing it. So I've just started talking to people and putting it out there and doing my own work. But I think I can already feel like a momentum. But again, it's not there yet. It's not like a solid thing. Like, okay, I can't just sit here expecting or like looking around for other people that have already done this. Because at this point, I know it's not out there and it's going to take some work on my part. It's kind of an exciting time to like witness that, like all the people around you sort of like finding their thing and doing what they need to do to see the results that they're hoping for. And I think for all of us, that result is different. But at the end of the day, I think we all want like that abundance. We want ease. We want to feel fulfilled. And we don't have to understand everyone else's path. We just have to understand our own. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that too.
One of the things that I think is so fun, I love looking ahead at the Chinese astrology and the zodiac. We go from the wood snake, which was very personal and emotional and slow moving in some ways, to the fire horse. But next year is the fire goat. And I love that idea of like goats and herds and moving through the change together, making sure that, we use them so often here, and particularly to clear fields or noxious weeds or things, because they can do it together so fast. And I think that will be the energy that we discover later in the year, is that we all thought we were starting these individual paths and they're going to merge. Like we're all going in the same direction. We just don't recognize it yet. And if you don't get started and the next person doesn't get started, the momentum isn't going to be there. So the sooner you recognize that, the better. And that's the thing about 2026. I mean, I look at the astrology and I told Andrea, it kind of makes me nauseous. Like, I remember in my early days of mediumship when spirit would come in really close and you kind of get this car sick, upset stomach feeling. At least that's what it showed up for me as. I get that energy feeling. And I'm trying to decipher, is it spirit coming in saying, no, really, it's going to be okay? Or is it just that I'm sensing the amount of change and the significance that this year has, and that literally all of us, I talk about December being tax season for astrologers because we're like, who's getting a karma rebate and who owes and what's going to happen in the next, we all want to know like what is going to happen. And so there's a lot of pressure on that to get it right and to look at every possibility. And I have to say, even I'm a little overwhelmed by the astrology of 2026. So it's hard for me to break it down into bite-sized pieces without talking about the whole picture. We already knew 25 and 26 were connected because we share so many of the similar transits. We also are deeply connected to 27 and even into 28. So this is, not to over or understate it. This is a moment for humanity. This isn't just another year to notch on your belt of like, oh, got through 2026. There were the Olympics, there was the World Cup. I took a vacation. This is on a level that I don't think any of us have ever witnessed. There may be a couple of 100-year-olds that have witnessed some of the things that we might be experiencing, but even then, they would have been babies some of the last times that we've had any of these transits. So it's really hard to state the importance of what this year is going to bring for so many of us.
Yeah, I really feel like that energy of going from the big picture, trying to break it down, and the idea of like everyone having an individual journey and then ending up together with other people. All that energy is bringing up this image in my head where it's like each of us has this scavenger hunt. It's like everybody gets a card, but we're all just looking to see signs of what other people might have, when like the fastest way to get there is to just start following the directions on your card until you end up meeting up with the people at the end that are on your team. Like if the direction is to go to place A and someone else is going to place B, you're going to end up in the wrong place if you follow them, right? And I think there's something to that that feels like the belief of like, oh, we all have a path that we sort of decide on before we get here. We don't all necessarily do exactly what was planned, but there's certain times where we have to get to a certain point and it takes us a different path. But I think there are certain things on the cards that like we know we have to do, and we're just feeling the pull to it now. We're feeling that energy of like, okay, I have found every other way to not do this, but I guess I have to do this now. And now it's just that point of like, okay, what steps do I take to get there? Some people, it's having to wrap their mind around something. Maybe they have all the pieces and they just have to feel confident enough to do it. Maybe for other people, they're starting from scratch and they have to find people who have done it or people who have resources that can help them. If you get the inspiration to like go to a certain event that might have people there, go to the event. If you get the inspiration to call a certain person who you know from the past who's in an industry you're interested in, give them a call. You know what the things are. It's just you convince yourself that you don't. You convince yourself that you have no idea what you're doing, but you're very capable. This came up in the Queen of Wands, came up in the Capricorn reading, and I feel like it's really coming into this 2026 energy where it's like you have to trust that you already know. And if it means you have to make a list of all the things that make you capable and make it objective and look at it as if it was, a job application and like, what are the skills? I have those skills. If you make a list of all the times you made a big change and all the things you did at that time. You are more capable than you give yourself credit for. And I think going into 2026 with all this change happening, we really need to lean on our own skills. We need to trust ourselves, and that'll help us find the right people. That'll help us connect up to the bigger vision. It'll help us figure out where we fit into this collective world. But I think there's no one else that can tell you at this point. Like, I think we all know that we have friends and people around us that have told us that we're able to do what we need to do, but we're the ones who have to take the action, right? And I think that's, again, that piece of like waiting for something to come to us, waiting for someone else to do it for us. And it comes to a point where you're just like, I just have to try. That's all you have to do. Just try. That's all we're asking. You know, it's early in the year. Just try something, see how it goes. We are allowed to change our minds later, but I think we all are so just, again, stagnant, that stale energy that Emily was talking about, that like anything different at this point is worth trying.
I love that image of everyone being on a scavenger hunt, but having different instructions and different goals. I really think that the more we kind of put blinders on, not to go back to the horse reference, but when you have a large team of horses pulling, they put blinders on so they can't see the distractions and things in a parade or whatever it is. And I feel that there is some of that. This is where Spirit said so clearly, simplify. Like, that has been my word moving into 2026. It's like, keep it simple, simplify, scale back. Find the one thing that's the most important. What is the one thing that you're willing to go on the scavenger hunt for? What's the one thing that you have to change? It doesn't matter what the rest of it does or feels like, or the emotional, muck we get sucked into. It's the one dream you have that you're not willing to give up on yet. That's the thing to kind of put all your eggs in that basket and to just scale back. Like, it doesn't have to be as complicated as we think it has to be. And that too is going to clear when we finally get so much energy out of Pisces. And I love Pisces. We wouldn't have the dreams and the creativity and the idea that we're all collectively connected without it. But there's something about being the individual and taking that step out on your own that actually causes the motion of spirit becoming real. We talk about what it takes for us in our physical to manifest. It is becoming real in the moment. How are we using that information to create our reality? And that, to me, really sums a big portion of what's coming this year.
I feel so much like Emily and I were talking a little bit ahead of this about that transition from Pisces into Aries, and how I was saying, like, I have so much cardinal energy in my chart and I feed off of it, even though Capricorn is a very different expression of it than Aries or any of the other ones. And I think I'm just so familiar in that energy and I'm grounded in that energy, so that like I do get to a point where I'm like, I just need to try something new. Like, I must throw the spaghetti at the wall. Like, just who cares? If you fail, you fail. Let's just get something happening here. Like, I appreciate all of the philosophy, but at some point you have to put it into action. Like Emily said, you have to take all that you've learned and appreciate the fact that we're all connected, but that gives us the support we need to do things. And I think that's where we're sort of at now. It's like we took the last year to realize that we're all more connected than we think. And then if we each take our own individual journey, like when all of this is happening, why does it matter what I'm doing? But I think that's where we need the blinders, to be honest, is just to trust that it is important what you feel like you need to do. You don't know what the world's going to look like on the other side of this. Like, if you're doing something more creative or more intuitive and you're like, this doesn't feel like a practical thing that everybody needs, but on the other side of whatever changes are happening, it may be the thing everybody needs. And I think that's where we don't know at this point. The more we can just say, all I know is that my soul, my body is dying to do this thing. And I have to assume that it's important. And if we're still sitting in the same seat we're in right now at the end of the year, we're going to feel a lot worse than if we at least tried a few things in between, right? And I think that's where the blinders are really going to help us. It's like not looking at other people's past, not comparing ourselves, but also not looking at what's happening around us as an influence, and like the fact that we have to do this thing, whatever that is for you.
I want to just circle back for those of you who aren't familiar with the term cardinal sign. if you think of every zodiac sign that starts a season, so this would be Aries in the spring, Cancer at summer solstice, we get Libra at fall equinox, and we have Capricorn, of course, kicking off winter solstice. It's that moment where you know it has to change. It kicks off that energy. And I always, when I teach my intuitive astrology class, I talk about Aries not only being the ram, but if you look at the glyph, it looks like a sprout of grass. It's the grass that it has to grow. It has to sprout. The seed has put its roots down. It has to break through the top of the soil. And if it freezes, it freezes. It's a risk it's willing to take because if it doesn't start now, it's not going to have fruit on it by the time it needs to. So when you think about that willingness, that cardinal energy that says, I have to do this, there's no other option. I've tried everything else. Yes, there's a risk, but the payoff is spectacular. Absolute fruit on the vine if you're willing to go for it. So, all right, I'm so curious what the cards are. I think we should dive in starting with what, January? Are you ready?
I am as ready as I'll ever be for this one. For January, I pulled the Two of Wands. We had that at some point last year as well. And I feel like this is the perfect card for right now because we're in this energy where we're not quite sure where we're going yet. We're not on the journey yet, but there is this spark that is telling us, okay, I think this is what I want. And we're looking out in the world to see evidence of it. It's like that, what we were talking about. It's like that point where you look out and you see, okay, I know this is what I want to do. I'm in here in my safe little bubble. I just need to know that I have a next step planned. There is a lot of preparation energy in the Two of Wands. It's like you've already gotten the inspiration. You have that spark of creativity already. You have that Ace of Wands already. You know that you have an idea. And now this Two of Wands is just like, how do I start the momentum? That whole scientific principle, like that, like getting into motion again is the hardest part. And that's where that Two of Wands gets a little bit stuck because it's looking too far out. It doesn't have enough of the blinders. It's looking at all the possibilities of how they could get started instead of just like what's right outside in front of me. And in this deck, the Light Seer's Tarot, it's this woman who's holding a wand, looking out the window, and she's got a globe and a map and a whole bunch of stuff with her already. She knows what she needs to do. She has the plan. It's just she's got to figure out what that first step is and feel like she's prepared enough to put herself out there. And I think this is kind of what January feels like. Traditionally, we tell ourselves we have to do our resolutions and our plans and all of that. But I think this year, more people than ever, from what I've seen, are kind of leaning more into just not really setting up resolutions, but just taking some action. And I think that now it's like, okay, well, this is the new plan. I still have all these resources. The first thing that's in your awareness that you know you can do, whether it's calling someone, taking a walk somewhere, buying something you need, asking for help, whatever it is, that first little step, even if it's sketching something, like getting something physically done is the best way to start getting the rest of the momentum because the more you start physically taking action, then you start to see, okay, well, I see if this worked, then maybe that would work. And it starts to spiral for you. Walking outside is literally the energy of that card. You're looking outside as if it's this hypothetical place, but you could literally just open the door and walk out there and go look for yourself. It's like when you're watching outside to see what the weather's like. It's like just walk outside. Here, I would be screwed because the sunniest day in the winter is always the coldest. And so I think there's that need to just actually go outside, actually take the step, take the walk, take the meeting, do the thing, and then go from there. So that's sort of the energy of January, I think. And I think because we're also, we're in this energy coming from 2025, we're a little bit skeptical. And I think that's why that first step is a little bit scary. It's like we've maybe seen that things are not ideal right now. Starting something doesn't feel ideal. But again, with that sprout, it's even though I think it will probably be a couple months before we start to actually see that sprout happening, like we have to kind of put the energy in first before we see the evidence, but I don't think it's going to be a long time. This Two of Wands really feels hopeful, and it feels, again, very action-oriented, where it's going to take a little bit of a push. You may need a little nudge. I always see the little wand and picture someone, like, nudging her with the other wand, like, okay, like, let's get it moving here. We can't sit inside forever. that hibernation is hard to break. So that's sort of the energy I'm feeling. Like, okay, we've been inside for a while now. We've been in holiday mode. We've been in lounging around, not knowing what day it is, but it's time to get back to business.
There is such a dual energy to January for me, and I 100% resonate with the card you pulled, particularly for the first 20-ish days of the month, particularly because Venus and Mars are traveling right with the sun, which means that they are invisible to us. Our action, our values, our desires, we're kind of blinded by the sun and we can't see them. So that means that even though all three of those are riding together in Capricorn, it's literally like we're making plans behind closed doors. We're doing and taking actions out of view. People can't see them. So this is very much that internal, I have to decide what I want to do. But I also think on a collective global scale, there are things happening behind closed doors that we aren't privy to, and we may not even see until February or March. We'll look back and be like, oh, it started right then at the beginning of the year or just a little bit after. We have, gosh, we have so many big things this month. But okay, so from the 5th through the 9th, we sort of have those backroom deals where the sun and Venus and Mars are all together. The sun always kind of burns off old versions. We call these cazimis, or a conjunction anytime these Venus or Mercury or Mars hit the sun. So it burns off some of that residue. So we've got that kind of clearer idea coming to picture. But then Mars, who's still in Capricorn, is going to be opposite Jupiter on the 10th. And this is where we start to feel, because Cancer wants us to pick the one thing that we love. What's the one thing that means the most? What is it that you value so much you love it more than yourself in some way? This is where that action is like, what am I willing to move forward? What's the one thing I have got to take forward with me? So that energy is building. Plus, of course, you've got the full moon in Cancer this weekend. It's just a very, I would tend to say, a little bit emotional part of the month at the beginning, but also inwardly emotional. Mercury and Mars meet up on the 18th. Again, these guys are still at the final degrees of Capricorn. But what's interesting is that the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars are all going to slide into Aquarius starting around the 20th. And they're all going to sneak up and join Pluto. So they're going to all meet with Pluto in the next 30 days. And this is a huge moment where we can see something coming. We sense it coming, but it isn't here yet. And then the biggest part of January's energy is Neptune moving into Aries. We had a preview last year from, gosh, I think it was April through about September, where we did kind of have this collective optimism and it was like, oh my gosh, we need to protest, we need to rally, we need to get together and make some collective change. And then it was like we all burned out in the fall. And I personally blame Neptune, but Neptune has been transiting Pisces since 2011. So there are literally some people that don't even remember what life was like before this transit happened. It feels very foggy and like we can't quite all get on the same page. We have optimism. We're also kind of waiting for this superhero to come. We know that there's a greater power. We've had such a huge influence in spirituality. But it's like, what are we going to do with it? So having Neptune move into Aries, that happens the 26th. This to me is the big kicker. We have a lot of energy coming in starting around, I'm going to say right around the 17th, 18th through about the 23rd, 24th, somewhere in there, where we've got Venus moving into Aquarius. The sun is going to trine Uranus, which is rebellion and electrifying quick change. Then we have this new moon in Capricorn, which is like, cut away, get clear on what you want to do. Mercury is going to hit Mars. Then Venus makes contact with Pluto. I mean, it's just every single day that week. It's what are we bringing to the surface? What are the things that have been hidden? Where are we taking change? How are we moving forward? And when Neptune hits Aries, It's like driving over the hill and suddenly the fog is gone and you can see further. I think we talked about in our last episode, maybe, I don't remember where I talked about this. Maybe this was with Kimberly. Hi, Kimberly, if you're listening. We were talking about seeing the mountain that you're going to climb and the fog line. You can't really see how high that peak is. And so you envision it being Mount Everest. And suddenly the fog clears and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is the cutest hill from England, and, I can pack a lunch and be up there by noon. It's not that big of a deal." But when you can't see the top, you don't know. And so I also feel like there's going to be this it's like we suddenly see that the problem either is bigger than we thought or it's not as big as we thought. But there's something about removing that cover from our eyes. Mars and Venus conjunct, particularly in Aquarius. This is like the thing about it, those two planets are conjunct in Jeffrey Epstein's chart. And so we have this conjunct coming again in Aquarius, particularly at this time of the month where I feel like more information is going to come out. And people born in 1953 and 1954 might find some pattern coming up again. This is going to be familiar to you because this was also conjunct at that time when you were born. But it's going to bring in a lot of energy for Russia, a lot of energy for China. This is where we start to see leadership changing on a collective scale. But again, keep in mind, some of these things might still be behind closed doors for just a little bit longer, but we're going to see cracks. Whatever starts to happen at the end of January is setting up the rest of the year. So I can't really iterate enough how important this first few weeks of 2026 is. Like, we are off to the races. You better find your horse, and maybe you have a saddle and maybe you don't, but it's time. It's go time.
Yeah, that collective urgency, I guess it is that Aries coming in, like it is really pulling and I can feel it like a tangible energy. For February, I pulled the King of Cups, and I think this is like classic Pisces sort of energy. I think there's going to be a lot of recognition of where people are at in their emotional intelligence. There's just this feeling that I get where it's like you're going to be able to maybe either see your own growth and see how you're holding your own in a different way. Maybe your boundaries are better. Maybe you're able to process things a little bit better than you would have in the past. There's something about like emotional intelligence and maturity that's coming in here. But I think on the flip side of that, we're going to see people who are still having really big reactions to small things. Something that I don't think I would have recognized as much in the past is like witnessing, even in people's posts and people's reactions, like seeing where it's just an emotional intelligence issue. Like it's not an urgency or like the issue isn't that big. Like it's just people don't know how to process their own emotions. And so that comes out in one particular way. For some people, maybe it's just crying instantly. For other people, maybe it's getting irrationally angry out of nowhere. Some people might shut down. Like we all know we have different responses. We each know for ourselves, like what our typical response is to something when we're overwhelmed emotionally. But I think there's something to being able to have empathy for people and to be able to be calm in your own self, regardless of how other people are reacting around you. I just think with a lot of change, everyone has a certain issue that's really close to their heart. And I think the more we can realize that we're all just reacting at different levels, like we're all experiencing similar things. It's just like each of us is having our own experience of that version of the world. And I just think even in our day to day, we're just going to recognize more. We're going to, again, recognize our own growth more to see that like we're not reacting and that we're witnessing as opposed to like participating in a lot of, emotional reactions. And recognizing that we are not responsible for anyone else's actions. We're responsible to make sure that we aren't impacting other people and like burdening other people with our emotions, but we aren't responsible to navigate other people's. And I just have this feeling that it's going to be showing up in the collective and it's going to be an individual thing. But the more you can just have that empathy, because even though the King of Cups, like he's very calm, he's very much in his own energy, but empathy is a big piece of that. Like you can have empathy for someone without feeling like you have to fix things for them or do things for them. Like you can have empathy by also saying, you know what, by me trying to take over and do this for the person, that's me saying I don't think they're capable. And I think we have to recognize that sometimes the only way for other people to grow is for them to be on their own journey and to have support, but also grow on their own. And I think there's just, for some reason, this feels really big for this energy. I think it is a Pisces sort of thing, but it's that connection to the bigger collective, but also your own emotions and like that depth that you have. Anything that you do feel yourself reacting to this month, really do a deep dive and try to do some healing in that. We can have that grasp on reality still, but also navigate those emotions for ourselves to see like, why does this particular thing elicit such a strong response from me? I just feel like there's a lot of watery emotions coming up here, but I think we are looking at them with a bit more of a level head and a little bit more of a future vision. It's not so much that we're like, oh my God, we're going to get stuck in it like a loop this time. It's not going to be like a rabbit hole, like all consuming thing. It's just, okay, like this is part of the process to get to where I'm going, but it doesn't need to be everything. We can keep moving. I can cry while I walk, do my errands, and just cry in the car in between.
I really like that because it does feel, I think on a personal level, most of us are going to have a year that opens up opportunities, moves us forward. Like individually, I think it could be quite good. I think where 2026 feels really tricky is like collectively, globally. What are the big things that are happening that you don't have control of? And like you said, how do I move through that? How do I still go get groceries when I just want to cry at whatever is happening in the news or to my neighbors or something? What I think is going to help, and I made a note about this for February, is that we've got Venus is still going to be in Pisces just for a short minute, and Jupiter is still in Cancer. So we still have those two trining each other. There's a harmonious sort of strengthening energy that comes with that. And it helps us to stay, like you said, a little bit emotionally grounded when so many other things are kind of flying. This is the month where, like, there's a little chaos, there's jagged action. Things are happening, things are moving. On the 3rd, Uranus goes direct. So this is the last few months where Uranus is going to be in Taurus. We have had it here for 7 years. Any of my earth signs or those of you that are fixed signs will know the last 7 years have felt almost like you were trying to get a firm step on quicksand. Like nothing has felt secure. You've built it up, you've tried to stand, it's fallen. You change, you pivot, the next thing, it just feels very ungrounding. It has also affected money globally. You look back 7 years ago, and we didn't really have a clue what Bitcoin was, or even the idea of a global international currency that then does away with, the US gold standard, or that the US dollar is somehow what every global finance is tied to. There's a feeling here where we're gonna kind of look around at each other and say, like, no one person gets to set this. This is power back to the people in some way. So I still think Uranus is gonna have a couple tricks up its sleeve while it finishes this little bout in Taurus. I also, and I've called this for several years, so I don't know, I still feel like Uranus has something to prove in terms of earthquake or flood or just something that is very potent weather and earth-wise. So it's just something that I kind of put on the radar, particularly like February through May of like a last hurrah. We've noted, if you watch Stefan Burns on YouTube, he's an astrophysicist, and he's been talking so much about all of the influence we've had around the Ring of Fire and the uptick we have had in volcanic activity and deep earthquakes. And so there are things that, we are set for a moment of release in some way on those major fault lines. And I still feel like that is a possibility. February 13th, this is a big one. Saturn finally moves into Aries. So now we've got Neptune into Aries, and it's moving at beyond a snail's pace. It doesn't even get to 1 degree very fast. Saturn, on the other hand, moves into Aries, and it's going to catch up to Neptune within about a week. They will both still be at 0 degrees, but this is one of the most pivotal moments that all astrologers have focused on for 2026 because we can't find another moment in history where these two planets have met at 0 degrees, the origin point of the zodiac. Now, that's not to say they don't meet. They do meet about every 34 to 36 years. And in fact, the last time they met in Capricorn in the 80s, 89, was the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Soviet Union. And if you take that back even further, every time they have met in the last about 4 iterations, something major has happened in rule change in Russia. So I still think that there is a large probability for that in some way. How close to that exact conjunct, we don't know, but it's definitely something on the radar. And what is so pivotal about this is not only is this at 0 degrees, so it's like this reset for the zodiac, for the world, for ideas. Those first and last degrees of any sign are just overwhelmingly full of underlying ideas and beliefs and mysticism, and there's just a potency to it. So Neptune and Saturn meet up on the 20th. On the 17th, we have our first solar eclipse of the year already. And it's in Aquarius because we're moving the nodes this year. So now we're bringing in Aquarius energy, which is Pluto. And the eclipse is going to be square to Uranus in Taurus. So this is a powerful solar eclipse. It's really only visible over Antarctica. So don't worry, you're probably not going to see it. But to have that literally usher in Aquarius 2 days before the conjunction, it's overwhelming, the amount of energy coming in with this. Now, pardon me while I shift pages because I have like 12 pages of notes about all of this. But when you think about the energy of Saturn, it is the structure. I saw someone talking about like the idea of a cardboard box. If Saturn is the cardboard box that you're going to ship something in, Neptune is the puddle of water that the cardboard box gets set in and suddenly loses its form. So it's almost like a folding point where structure collapses or where structure is brought to this dream that we thought was impossible or this idea that was considered impossible. It's like a distortion point in reality because you think, oh, this box is so structural. I can ship $1 million painting in it and it's going to be fine. And yet something so simple can destroy it. Water can destroy it. So there's something about, how deep does it go? What are we missing? Is there something else that's breaking down that we're starting to see? And someone else even used the phrase a climax without conclusion. And I kind of find that interesting because, yeah, if your cardboard box gets wet, if the idea becomes watered down, then it's like you have to start over from scratch. And what does that look and feel like? So this goes back to that King of Cups to me and the feeling of like, you're going to have to be okay in this on your own. You've got to kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps and say, I still have to eat. I still have to go to work. I still have to take the kids to school. I still have to walk the dogs. Finding something in those routines that gets you through will be helpful. It's going to be very, very interesting because Neptune is going to stay in Aries until 2039. So this is not a quick, fast burn. This is big, sustained change on a large scale. And Saturn is going to stay here until 2028. So this is one of the only times they meet up. They get within a couple of degrees each other again, which they did last summer as well. That was right around, gosh, what else did we have happen last summer? Assassinations, just some other big global things that took place the last time they met up. So pay attention to your surroundings, be careful, and just trust that we're all in it together. Yeah, February is big. I don't know that I even have enough words to put it all. Disruptive, shocking, currency changes.
It does feel like we're going to need to really lean on that emotional intelligence and the being grounded for sure. That's huge energy changes, which kind of makes me feel like there's a reason this card came next. For March, I pulled the Eight of Wands, which is very fast moving energy. It's a fire energy. So with Aries, that makes sense. And I think if we're going with this horse energy, it's like that's where having the reins and knowing where you're going to direct the horse, right? That horse is going to trust you. So you have to trust yourself first. And I think that's where coming out of a month where it's like, okay, now maybe you were really tested in your emotions. And then when you realize, oh, I actually stayed pretty calm, so then when an opportunity or a thought or an idea really comes forward, you're going to be more likely to trust yourself and go with it. And I think that is the momentum. It's like really allowing yourself to see how all of these energies can build. I think that there's obviously going to be stumbling blocks and whatnot, but I think, like we said before, sometimes you really do just have to trust yourself and make a move because you don't know what's going to happen from point A to point B. And even if things aren't looking the greatest now, something could change while you're going and make it faster, make it better, come into your awareness. And I think that self-trust is going to be a big part of it. But with the Eight of Wands, too, there's always that element of abundance or reward or seeing evidence. And I think this is like a reward for taking action. It's a reward for getting through that slog of emotional shifts and things. When you see things aren't going well or something collapses or something doesn't go right, and you're able to immediately come up with a solution or you're able to think of another direction. And I think the more we can do that, it's like a bridge to the rest of the year. But if the people are still like, okay, yeah, this might be happening, but I still know I'm going here. So I can't get, maybe that road's closed, but I know there's another route. And like, you just keep going. And I think the more we can see ourselves as maybe we're not the box, maybe we're the courier. Maybe we are the shipping company at this point. We have evolved and we're like, you know what? I'm just going to move this myself. That energy can really benefit us if we are willing to have that cardinal energy and to just start the thing, to just do it, to just see what happens and take that risk, like what Emily said. Like, we don't always know, we never really know if something's going to work out. But I think personally, and what I would say for a lot of people is like, we're going to regret taking no action and being in the same place a month later versus taking a chance and then seeing what could come and seeing what happens when we do that. And whenever the Eight of Wands comes up, chances are the energy's in your favor and things are going to move faster than they would at another time. Like there's just a lot of alignment that comes in with the Eight of Wands. And also energy for yourself. Like you just will feel more energized if you're moving forward and you're seeing yourself do the things you've been wanting to do. There's something that just like picks up in your energy where you just also broaden your capacity for what you're capable of. And I think that, again, goes back to that self-trust. So that emotional stability that you're getting in February and you're recognizing in yourself, that helps you to say, okay, well, if I can stay calm during that, then why can't I just take this where I'm going to go? Why can't I just keep going? Why not give into that and see the abundance, see the opportunity, see the reasons you started it in the first place and allow that to like fuel you forward. But I just have this feeling that like the way things are aligning and changing, more attention might even just be drawn your way. So you may be doing the same thing in the same path, but more people will see what you're doing. More, the right people will come on your path. Like you don't know what the things are that will nudge you forward. This is just like a catapult that at some point is going to like push you way further than you would have been had you not taken the chance or started moving forward. So March feels like it's still going to be bumpy, but the whole point is to just keep going and keep trusting in the vision that you had at the beginning of the year.
One of the things I forgot to mention about that time period in February, not only do we have like the eclipse and the conjunction, but we also then start the year of the fire horse right then, like at the same pivotal moment. And the image I got when you were talking was like a stampede, literally seeing a huge volume of people taking off in a direction and you kind of having the inner compass, the inner knowing of like, nope, this is my plan. This was the one thing I was going to focus on this year, and I'm not willing to let that go, even if it means I'm going in a totally different direction. And I just keep getting this feeling around like it may make you feel like you don't have empathy or like you're cold to the situation. And I don't want you to lean into that because I think the truth is like collectively we're going through this. And so everyone is sharing that burden, that it's not only one person. Where we have felt for so long with this Pisces energy, like it's the one person that's got to carry us through. It's the one family member that has to carry us through. It's, the hero. This time it's a little, Aries is like, I hesitate to call it selfish, but it's like, I'm ready to sprout and I can't wait for all the other buds on the tree to be ready if today is the day I need to sprout. So there is a collective feeling in March of a little bit of a reprieve. It's definitely much calmer than what we've experienced. That being said, I think there will still be plenty going on to take your focus, but we have Mercury going retrograde just before it goes retrograde on the 26th. So you enter into March with it in retrograde, and all Mercury retrogrades this year are going to be in water, which at some point will literally be the only water we are experiencing in all of the zodiac. So I think that's very interesting that it's always an inner emotional look this year as to how we're experiencing these outer transits and things that are happening. Right away on the 3rd, we have the lunar eclipse. Now, this is taking place in, it should be Pisces. Yes. It's one of the last in that series of Virgo-Pisces. And so we're kind of clearing up some of the things that have been happening since 2024 because we've had that focus in Virgo and Pisces. What is interesting about this is that it is going to be opposite Mercury, and Mercury retrograde in Pisces is Mercury is in its fall there. It's not happy. It's like, I don't know what I think or what I believe or where I'm going. So there's some ambiguity around that. And I think this is where you were talking about that. I just have to find the inner strength. And I'm either going to go all in and it's the wrong direction and I pivot later, or I'm going to go all in on myself and recognize how much growth I have had and that it's worth it to me to chase those personal dreams. On the 2nd, Mars moves into Pisces, so we're going to have a little bit more water before some of that clears up. Jupiter finally goes direct in Cancer. It's been retrograde through most of the winter. So that's going to help because poor Jupiter, we're going to put a lot of emphasis on it through June because it's really the only planet that's kind of pulling us into something that's a little more heart-centered. Cancer is ruled, of course, by the moon, and it's like, okay, where can we find a softness in some of these other transits? And that's what Jupiter's going to be helping us do for a while. But I really think there's going to be kind of misunderstandings that are going to come up during this time frame that could lead to someone taking action that they didn't mean to or didn't even need to. Where are things going to kind of get distorted in some way? And hopefully when Jupiter wakes up out of its retrograde, it's going to help. It kind of says, okay, slow down. We're all family. We're all going the same direction. There's some nostalgia about that, but Jupiter also says it's okay to bring more people in, to put more people under that umbrella, to care in a way that maybe we haven't. So I think out of all of the months, March is a little bit of a deep breath, but it's an emotionally centered deep breath.
I feel like we will need it after the first couple months. So that is good news. For a couple months here, like the energy feels like it's moving forward in a good way because in April, I pulled the Magician, number 1. After having an eclipse and after this energy of March giving us that chance to sort of breathe and move forward and have that momentum behind us, it really is showing us, again, like the Magician is like the self. I have everything I need. I have these opportunities to make magic out of whatever comes. And that is a skill that I think we're developing throughout the whole year. There's this back and forth between like the momentum, putting the blinders on, and then trusting yourself. It's like we have to keep going through that cycle until it eventually becomes natural and actually keeps moving. It's like for the first while, we're just sort of like wobbling and going back and forth and taking the zigzaggy way. But there comes a point where we actually are going straight forward and everything's working in our favor. Like there's just these certain points where if you keep holding on, there will be a point where there's no going back. We're in that new reality. And this feels like a turning point. Like a major arcana coming up at any point is significant. And I think at this point, in the year. It's as close to the Fool as we can get. It's the one after the Fool. It's like when you say something out loud and you're like, this is what I'm going to do, then you feel that personal responsibility to keep it going and to figure it out. And the more, again, with these internal moments of like Mercury retrograde, like all these internal things that we have to experience at different points in the year, all it's doing is fueling us forward more. It's like giving us more reason to believe that we can do it, more reason to move forward. That Queen of Wands really did stick with me when it came up in Capricorn, because there's something about that, like objectively seeing how qualified you are and how capable you are. Sometimes we really do need to see on paper for ourselves the things that we already have done that have qualified us for this. And I feel like this is another one of those in between moments where it's like there is momentum, we're on the journey, and it's like right before we have to like cross a big bridge or like do something a little bit scary, we sometimes will turn back and say, maybe I'll wait a month or maybe I'll wait a while. But this magician is saying, no, I have all the magic. I have all of the opportunities. I have all of the things I need to be the alchemist and to create what I need. So as long as I keep going, I'll have whatever in my Mary Poppins bag. I will have anything I need. I just need to keep going, and that is the important step. And it's this like very grounded but also connected sort of energy where it's like we are feeling connected to spirit. We're feeling like that new year, new me sort of energy at this point. And it's like, I'm not turning back. It's almost like a stubbornness where it's like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it myself. And again, I'll connect with people when I'm meant to connect with them. I'll see the people that are on the same path, but I'm not going to see them unless I go there. And again, with that energy of like, yeah, everyone else maybe is on the stampede and you're lonely and you're like, shit, should I turn around? Like, did I make a mistake? Should I just go join the stampede? Should I go back to what I was doing before? But this is that nudge to be like, no, the wind's at your back now. You have to keep going. You don't want to go back into the wind. It's going to feel awful. It's going to feel like exhausting. It's going to take your breath away. You're going to lose your momentum and you're going to be working twice as hard to go in a direction that's not meant for you. Magician is coming in to sort of give you that spark of inspiration. And it's almost like you do one small thing that comes to you and you get such a big payoff from it that it builds and it helps you realize, okay, yes, we're doing something here. You're having that reinforcement and grabbing all the things you need. Maybe this is where you are going and grabbing all your supplies, restocking. And now you know more of what you need. You're more sure about the resources you're going to need. But it just feels like this April energy is going to be kind of feeling the rest of the year. It just feels like this is an important point for you to really get clear so that you know where you're going, what you're going to need, and so that you can get that support when it comes.
This is an interesting month because I feel like the personal feeling versus the collective feeling are, again, very different. I agree with you on the personal level. I think so much of what we're learning this year is how fast we can actually manifest things, which I think is why we've been given that message over and over again to kind of simplify and get really clear. Because it's like the thing you think about, like you said, you're going to get results that are going to be instant and you're going to be like, what? Where did that come from? I wasn't expecting that magical magician result. But where I think it gets tricky is that on a global scale, this is a very tense, wild month. On the 9th, Mars moves into Aries, so it's finally done with water. And at this point, we're starting to get those planets building up together. They're all going to be in Aries by the end of the month. We're going to have 7 planets. And like just Jupiter and the moon are hanging out on the other side, giving us a little emotional support. So that much combined energy is really unheard of, particularly in Aries. And so this is like everybody going full steam ahead in their own direction, which feels like that stampede. But instead of running collectively towards an individual goal, it's like everybody's just like the gates were left open and it's a free for all. We also get Venus square Pluto. This is like suddenly we're willing to make changes or to look at something or the death of an old way, but it's going to support us in kind of a new and exciting possibility. We're going to have the Sun square Jupiter. That's, I think, hopefully at least a little bit grounding in an emotional sense. The Sun in Aries is going to get cooled down by some of that moon, Cancer, Jupiter energy. Hopefully, it doesn't inflame it and make it worse. Again, this is the difference where it's like personal versus collective. That happens on the 5th. Then we really get into the meat and potatoes of the month. On the 10th, Mars, like I said, is in Aries. Then we've got Venus into Aries. Now we've got Saturn. Basically, we have everything: the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn. Jupiter is opposite. Chiron is in. And we end up with the moon. So that's 7 bodies hanging out for a very, oh, and Neptune, right? So even 8 at one point when the moon is there. This is a lot. Mars and Neptune are then going to go conjunct, so right on top of each other on the 12th. This is a big one because I feel like Mars and Aries is the spark that like sets the wood pile on fire. And when it hits Neptune, we had Mars square Neptune in Capricorn when we had the height of lockdown in 2020. So it usually brings about something where we feel stalled or like we have to change track, change direction. But being in Aries, this feels much more inflamed. This is the point where I think things catch on fire or there's just a massive takedown in some way. This is also like the October Revolution in Russia. This is the history of that. We also have a major history of things changing in China during this connection. So this is where on the global scale, things are going to get rocky and stock markets could look weird. Money's going to look weird. All of those things are happening. But then internally, you're like, yeah, I'm still moving towards my dream. And I'm personally not seeing maybe the effects of that. Like what I'm manifesting or the things I'm working on are still turning out okay. So this is that inner balance sometimes between self and other that I think is really going to be heightened with so much energy in Aries. It's like, I have to continue doing what is right for me, even though I see collectively what's happening. There's only so much I can do for the other side of the world. I can send help, I can send money, what can I do besides fly over there and help someone I don't really know? So we have Mars and Neptune meet up on the 12th. Then Venus finally moves into Taurus on the 14th. That's going to help a little bit to kind of flow us back into our bodies. I feel like bring us back into personal awareness. But then it meets up with Uranus at some point. So this is just a point where a lot of planets are meeting up. Mars and Saturn meet up. Venus meets up with Neptune. Like it's just pow, 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 one after another. And then finally, by the end of the month, the 25th, Uranus moves into Gemini. This to me feels like a very confusing point in the year where I also think as Uranus hits Gemini, and we had a preview of this last year, July through November of last year. And it's kind of this moment where are we going to recognize what's AI anymore or not? Is it going to get so good that we can't tell? And then we start getting fed information or stories that maybe aren't real, but half the people think they are and half the people think they aren't. And we don't know if we're going to trust the information we're getting from the news and whose news source are you listening to? This is where that confusion comes in of like, what is reality? What isn't? And we know things are happening, but we don't quite get the whole story. So there's a lot of confusion around this, and it kind of peaks around the 20th of April. So I would just kind of keep in mind that that is a time to be aware of things that are happening either in your area or people getting riled up at the change that's happened. Do we have terrors? Do we have individuals going out of their way to cause more chaos and distractions? It's just a very interesting time. And also if we have Russia and China and even the United States, because we're kind of the 3 dinosaurs that are on our last leg here, what are people willing to do or to go through in order to maintain the status? And it's usually those last little bits that kind of spit out some of the most traumatic or the biggest impact in some way. So again, April gives me a knot in my tummy. I'm nauseous. But I want to say I agree with you, Andrea, in that I feel like individually, this could be a month where we see the manifestations happening. but that collectively it's going to be very overwhelming. It's like the magician has too many tools at their disposal and they don't quite know which one to use.
That totally makes sense because it's still a fiery energy. I feel like even though the magician is a major arcana, I think it holds a lot of fire. And I think that there's potential for us to either try to do too much to go into that collective energy to run into the fire, or, maybe we do need to kind of, like you said, do what we can with the resources we have and then go back onto our path and really keep moving in a positive direction for our own goals. Again, keeping in mind that our own goals, our own path really does impact the collective. We just don't know how yet. We won't know until we're on the other side of all of this, where we fit into the way the world is organized. We won't know what's important, what everybody needs, what everybody is putting their money into.
I just want to add to that real quick because that really hits on this idea of, are we in an era of new consciousness? So many people are talking about 5D and all of these things, but I do think there is suddenly maybe an awareness around this time frame where what I think can manifest affects you and what you think can manifest, and we start to see how that moves out and trickles out. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a very important part of the puzzle.
Yeah, I do think that there's going to be that push and pull between like the collective, like checking in and knowing what's happening. We do want to be informed, but the more we focus on our own path, the more we're going to see how we are going to fit into a new version of what the world is and where people are focusing their attention, their money. We can't pretend like we don't need to live and have abundance. And I think that's something that it's okay to know that that's part of the goal of moving towards something. Even if you are in a more spiritual or creative field, it's still important. And that I think we're going to see on the other side of this that we are going to be valuing things very differently. So if all of us collectively put our attention and our money in a different direction, instead of waiting for the systems to change, that will change the systems. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot of, especially with the Aquarius energy. I'm paying attention to the people who are buying like physical DVDs and people who are watching really low budget things. I think we're going to come back to these things. Like if we look at a lot of our favorite movies from the past, they weren't the ones with this massive blockbuster budgets, right? And I think it's like the humanity again. And so I'm really interested to see where that goes. And this fuels into the next card for May because I pulled another major arcana. I pulled the Chariot, which magician to chariot, like 8 of Wands to magician to chariot, like for our own personal journeys at least. There's a lot of movement. And the more focused you are, like one of the main key things of the Chariot is taking two things and putting them in the same direction. So this could be self and collective. This could be a lot of different things for like what these two energies coming together are. But this is just showing you two major arcana in a row going in a positive direction, moving you forward. It's like you're not turning back. There's no turning back now. The course has been corrected and you are now going in the right direction and you can feel the difference. Something that comes up a lot with the Chariot, too, is that the reason he's on this journey is because he's leaving the old civilization behind. He's going forward and he's trusting that he's heading towards something that's going to be more beneficial for him. And that's why it's like kind of taking two things and bring them together because he really doesn't have the support and like the whole community that he had before. He's just trusting that he's going to get there when he gets there and that everything he needs is going to be waiting for him there. And I think that's where we're all at this point. And that's where I think it is collective and individual. I think those are the two pieces. You may not be personally tapped into the collective, doing the activism or whatever, but I just think we're going to see parallels. And this is where I think I'm getting a really strong feeling in like my heart center, where I think this is where you start to see like, oh, people do value this. Like I put all my energy into this thing that I thought, I don't know, nobody seems to know what I'm doing over here. And then all of a sudden, all it takes is like, for example, heated rivalry. All it takes is the right people coming into contact with what you're doing, where all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a need for this. Like you don't know. Like maybe it was a really niche thing that you've been doing all along. And then all of a sudden that becomes the mainstream thing. We really don't know what the reason is why something feels so strong in our bodies and our energies and why it keeps coming back to us. But we have to now trust it. And this is like May, right? Like this is a few months in. If you've kept with the same thing for that long and you happen to meet up with a collective energy of some sort, it could just be in your community. It doesn't mean it has to be the whole world is looking at you. But it's enough to sustain you, to keep you going, to give you more money, more resources, more connections, to then keep that momentum going. And I just feel like this, 3-month period here, we're going from the Eight of Wands to the Magician to the Chariot. We really don't have that opportunity to turn back. Like there's too much already going in that new direction. And I think collectively we're going to feel that too. Even though we may not quite yet see the final outcome or see exactly what it is, it's taking shape and like we can see it and it's moving and it's something that's living and breathing and happening, as opposed to that energy of like questioning, going backwards, turning, more internal. Last year was very internal. We were all on our own personal healing journeys, but this year is like we're out there in the world. People can see us. We're vulnerable. We are doing the thing. We're connecting with people. And that is the strength. And I think that's something that with the Chariot, this is where this person is going. They're finding this new community. They're like, okay, maybe in the past this worked for me, but I'm not feeling like I'm growing. I'm not feeling like anybody in this particular community is seeing me. I'm sort of getting lost in the shuffle. And so I just feel like a very positive feeling. Like, obviously, anytime there's a big change happening, there's going to be some ups and downs. But I think as long as you still stay on the path, give yourself moments to rest, give yourself time to make sure you have the resources you need. But I think intuitively you're going to know when those times are. Like, I get this feeling that burnout is not going to be as prevalent this year because you're going to say, okay, this is how my body feels when I need to rest. So I'm going to rest now. And like, there's going to be more awareness overall. And I think that connection to the body is going to be so important throughout the year to see, like, oh, you know what? Things are kind of quiet right now. This would be a good time to take a vacation or take a couple days off while things are quiet. And then when you come back, you're refreshed, you're ready to go. Like, there's no burnout. I just see it constant movement forward. I think in the past few years, if we look back at even the astrology, the cards, if we were to look back at the patterns, it's always like go, go, go. Oh, got to take a break and recoup and heal whatever it was I just did to myself. Like, we've been doing that for like 5-6 years. Like, Emily and I have been doing this for a while together too. So like I have this like connection with the cards and the astrology that I can feel too at this point. And I think we haven't had this where it's just constant movement forward, like month after month, where yes, we're taking breaks, but there's nothing that's saying we're going backwards. Everything is heading in a forward direction, whether traumatic or not. Like, it's happening and we're moving. There's like, we're not going to have that collective of people that are too stubborn clinging on. That's not going to have an impact as much as it has in the past. That clawing things, to keep them as they are, we're over that. There's enough people that are ready to just keep it going, even though it's hard, even though it's exhausting. It's worth it at this point.
Yeah, we were talking about April having like this inflamed speed. And I think it's funny, the chariot, I really feel like May is kind of divided into two sections. There's the beginning, like up to the 15th, where Mercury moves into Taurus, it meets Venus there. This is very like, okay, back to body, back to self, back to enjoyment. And, that very, oh, pretty energy. I always think this is like spring, like just enjoy the flowers for crying out loud. Then we have Pluto going retrograde on the 6th. So again, it's in Aquarius and staying there, but it's going to back up for 6 months. And this is, okay, how do I fit into the collective? How are all these pieces fitting together? What happens between the 16th, 17th, and 18th is literally 3 planets move into 3 new signs in 3 days. So we get Mars moves into Taurus on the 16th, then Venus moves into Cancer on the 17th, then Mercury hits Gemini on the 18th. Plus there's a new moon in the middle of all of that. And it kind of, from that point, gives us this almost like the 5 best weeks of the year. I hate to burst your bubble now, but this is kind of the moment where you gotta like just enjoy the ride for a minute. I think I agree. There's a feeling of, we've yoked the horses together. You recognize that we're going in the right direction. It feels good. We're not alone. There's a collective movement that feels really good. What does worry me slightly on the 25th, we have Mars squaring Pluto. And particularly with Mars in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius, this is just kind of a rough point. Again, I think this will be collective much more than individual, but it's got Saturn kind of tied into the whole thing too. If we look back historically at what this has been like, a lot of these influences and transitions with so much Aries energy are very warlike, but they're generally warlike in that they're fighting for better human rights. I think a lot of times Aries gets blamed for just chaos and war for the sake of chaos and war, but actually Aries is the only one who never attacked a woman. We look back at those Greek myths and Greek mythology, he actually defended women most of the time. And there's something about that that makes me feel like any of the warlike tendencies that are going to come up this year are going to be in some way for the betterment of the people, for the betterment of the people that have been held down. We'll see. When we look back, like I was saying, historically towards like the Civil War, which we have a lot of similarities between, as well as the Revolutionary War, as we're getting almost exact placements to where we were as a nation 250 years ago when we were founded. This Mars square Pluto can bring up like some of the most potent or influential battles. So this is where I feel like it could be the last throes of something out there, the last struggle of it. But we're like, no, we're already leaving. Like, you can throw a hissy fit back there and blow things up, but like, we're done. That's not going to work anymore. You're not going to catch us. So we'll see. I think as we move into June, this is kind of the peak energy for the year of like, okay, I can take a breath. I have some hope. I'm, like you said, in the chariot, leaving things behind for something that's better.
Yeah, that moment of like enjoying it. I feel like the chariot, it's like he's on there, he's excited, he knows he's going somewhere good, and it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. Like that's not a factor. I'm far enough away now that again, like you said, if someone's throwing a hissy fit or trying to get my attention, I'm too far gone. I don't even know what's happening. I'm not even turning around to look, focused on where I'm going. And I think it's kind of interesting because for June, I pulled the Nine of Wands. And I think we're still in Wands here, which is so interesting. I only had the King of Cups out of all of this. It's all very fiery energy, which again, with so much energy in Aries, totally makes sense. And I think this energy here is like maybe it might slow down a little bit, like what Emily was saying, like that 5 weeks is like the good period. So we might still be in this a little bit here where it's fiery, but it's the point where like maybe we're getting a little bit tired and we're getting to the point where we're like, okay, I really thought this was going to be it at this point. But it's that energy to keep going. You're so close and you have to kind of push through that last bit of energy that is maybe hard to harness. It's hard to keep going. Like maybe you do need to take a little bit of a rest, maybe, fuel up again, but keep taking steps. If you have to slow down, that's fine, but keep taking steps. Like don't stop completely because it's, like, as we discovered at the beginning of the year, with that Two of Wands, it's very hard to get going from a stop versus just slowing down and maybe choosing the tasks that you're most equipped for at the moment and then picking it up again once you start to feel the energy building. But I think the more we can focus on the outcome and like where we're going and how we're going to feel when we see it come together, it'll help us have that little bit of a spark to just keep going. The next card after the Nine of Wands is the Ten of Wands, which is exhaustion, having to leave things behind, being overwhelmed. We don't really want to get to that point. You need to have something to keep you going, even if it is just like watching something inspiring or like consuming something inspiring. You need something to keep you on that track so that you don't completely hop off and have to like convince yourself to get back onto it. And that's the energy I'm feeling here. And I think this will be a collective thing as well. I think it might feel exhausting, like maybe things are getting drawn out further than they need to be. Maybe there's extra red tape being put up towards things. That's the whole thing, is like those things being put in the way are intentionally to make you back down and give up and think, okay, it's never going to happen. But if you know, you will be able to push past it and say, no, I'm not falling for that. I'm still going to get through this. You can't stop me. Maybe I might slow down a little bit, but that's just to re-strategize and find a new strategy moving forward. And I think we are going to see this collectively and individually. And at this point too, keep in mind, this is June. This is like going into summertime. We're going to hit solstice at this point, so throughout the month. And I think we do tend to either want to just turn into like, okay, this is fun time. It's summer. Let's all just like take a break. But I think we need to still keep on track. Like maybe school's not over yet. Maybe we need to just keep going forward a little bit. We can still have fun. We can still enjoy ourselves. Again, we can slow down, but not enough that it's at a stop. We can have fun along the way, maybe celebrate a little bit at this point to keep your spirits up. But I do think that we need to keep moving and trust that we're so, so close to what we are trying to manifest.
Yeah, June is an interesting one. It, I think, will look and feel like some of the nicest energy, but I also think, like you said, there's going to be like red tape or things behind the scenes that haven't cleaned up. And so it's like a do I trust it kind of energy. On the 9th, it's really lovely. Venus and Jupiter are going to meet up for the last time in Cancer. And this is nice because it kind of unites like opportunity with your heart space, really. So it's like, okay, I feel hopeful. I feel like there's a chance and I don't want to give up. Where it gets tricky is by the end of the month. And literally from the 9th on is not bad. We have some pretty easy, manageable transits. But on the 28th, Mars moves into Gemini. Okay, what's tricky about that is that it's going to catch up with Uranus in like no time at all. Then Mercury goes retrograde on the 29th and it's in Cancer. So here we are with another watery retrograde. Um, and then on the 30th, Jupiter leaves Cancer for the last time and moves into Leo. We're going to have a lot of emphasis with Jupiter and Leo kind of holding things together through the last part, particularly. And not to give away the whole plot, but as we move into particularly September, October, we're going to have a Venus retrograde. We're going to get set up for an end of the year's Mars retrograde. And actually, in the middle of Venus retrograde, Mercury is going to retrograde. So we have like this weird Venus only goes retrograde every year and a half to 2 years. Mars is only every 18 months. Mercury is, of course, usually 3 times a year. So to have all of them combined in the fall is going to be really heavy. And all of them are going to aspect Cancer or Leo in some way or another. And they're going to be kind of straddling Libra and Scorpio, which in some ways is one of the most challenging areas because it goes from this very heart-centered, selfless place that just wants to do the best for everyone to very internal, where do we no longer fit together? What needs to be brought to the surface? What are the secrets you're not saying out loud? And so it's this in between of like, I don't want to say anything, but I can't not say something because it's going to eat me up inside. So, of course, that's coming later. Like I said, the end of June kind of starts to set some of these things up, and particularly for a very spicy July. July is, I think, aside from February, April, and July are the biggest months of the year. We're going to have Mars meeting up with Gemini on the 3rd and 4th, which is the birthday of good old US of A. But Mercury goes retrograde the very day before that. It's just like there's too much. There's plot twists, everything's moving, and it's like we've gone from this kind of, okay, not necessarily sleepy feeling, but like, okay, things are moving and we have hope again. So where this affects us individually, I think it's interesting that you pulled the 9 of Wands because I think it can either, like you said, push us into that 10 of Wands territory really fast. You can pick up too much, you can get overwhelmed, or you can say, nope, I've got this. And there's only so much I can do, and I have to stick with the direction I'm going with the chariot and the horse. Maybe a horse is gone, maybe I'm down to one horse, whatever that looks like. But you kind of have to find a new center again at the middle of the year. July is loud, explosive. It's a tough one. And I don't know how far we want to get into the rest of the year because we will, of course, record again. But we have this intense July. We go right into the second eclipse season. Then we wind up with those retrogrades, things kind of ease out towards the end of November, but we're also building towards a Mars retrograde and then power right into 2027. So this year is like 2 steps forward, 1 back, maybe even 3 forward, 1 back. We see hope and we get momentum, and then it's like, "Oh my god, another thing, are you kidding me?" And then we get momentum and we feel better, and then it kinda comes out of left field again. So this is where we're recognizing what our own, like you said, personal individual motivation is, what you're willing to stay clear on, what you're willing to fight for. And again, this is the point of the year where I kind of run out of words. I'm just going to preview a little bit of July because I think it's important. Anytime Mars and Uranus have met up, of course, the last 3 or 4 times it's happened in Taurus. In 2024, we had Trump's assassination attempt, and then Biden dropped out. In 2022, Mar-a-Lago was raided, and Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. That set off all sorts of international drama. And then in 2020, that's when we had literally to the day, the January 6th riots in the Capitol. So when Mars meets up with Uranus, it's big. And this is the first time we're getting it in Gemini now. So there's a little bit of a different flavor. It's just going to be interesting to see how technology is involved. Are we looking at more drones versus humans? One of the things we talked about was so much energy and the similarities to the Civil War. There was so much optimism at the beginning of the Civil War because we weren't fighting it like the way we did in the Revolution with muskets that took 3 minutes to load and you waited till you could see the white of their eyes. All of a sudden, we had like trains and machine guns and things that were impactful, and the carnage was far bigger than anyone expected. And so, in the beginning, when they set up picnics, they literally put picnics. Families would go and watch the battle, and then they realized, oh my God, this is kind of horrific, and it's lasting way longer than we expected. There was this realization that the dream was different than the reality. And this is where I think we have a wake-up call somewhere in 2026, because we've moved all this energy out of Pisces, and it's like we have to wake up. There's a dream version and then there's reality. And so what comes to surface? What do we finally understand? Now we're looking at fighting war from computers and people aren't even involved except for maybe the people that are caught in between. There's something about that that speaks to a humanitarian level that says, are we allowing drones to carry out attacks on people? Because there's a facelessness that finally, I think, kind of gets its own reality check in some way. So while June does feel, I like that 9 of Wands, it's like, okay, we can keep up with it. It's a building point, a stepping stone for sure for what's coming for the rest of the year.
I feel like this intensity that we're building up to, this is just kind of coming into my energy where it's like, that's why it's important to keep focused on what you're doing, because regardless of what happens externally, collectively, I think we need to be setting ourselves up for success. And then hopefully that'll be a point where people are looking for you. They're seeking it out. And if you've created something, then this will be the time when it maybe gets noticed. Obviously, we're not going to be ignoring what is happening collectively. But again, even if we're slowed down, if we're still keeping our eye on what it is we're doing and the purpose behind it, what we want to do to connect with other people, how we think it's going to benefit the people around us, I think it'll help us. If you completely check out from what you're doing in your dreams, then you get caught up in this collective energy and start to spiral. It's a lot harder to motivate yourself again after something like that to go back into what you were doing. And I think that's where it's not bypassing and ignoring the collective. It's just knowing that the only thing you can do is to work towards something that can benefit and impact people in the long term. And I think it will help to ground you if you have had this consistent vision the whole year and you're able to ground into it. And like, if that's where you're able to like use your energy, that excess nervous energy, if you're able to put it into something, you're sort of gifting some of that energy to people around you as a way of like benefiting you, but also benefiting the collective maybe earlier than you planned. But I'm a little bit frightened for the rest of the year after this, so I feel like we do need to those 5 weeks of beauty, we need to really reap them and enjoy them as much as we can this year.
The one of the things I love is Jupiter moving into Leo. I think any fixed sign, so this is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, if you have anything in terms of placements in those signs in your chart, Leo always brings about this feeling of like, just shine you, just be you. Do the playful thing that you love, do the art, be creative. What's the recreation that brings some meaning to life? And so I have a lot of hope hung on Jupiter pulling us through the fall in terms of like, this is when art is going to get important again, or this is when there's going to be a collective show, or even with this Uranus and Gemini energy, like, do we suddenly all have record players? Like, are we going analog and sharing mixed tapes, or is there something new that comes in that's like the next technology? I think there's something really exciting about that, and I hope that it is in some ways art and creativity that pull us through some of these darker moments because it's what makes us human. So many times when we connect to spirit on the other side, it's like, just be you, be human, enjoy it while you're here. And I don't want us to wish away the time we have during this tumultuous year because obviously we chose to be here for, I think it must have been a hell of a sales packet. That's all I can say. Convinced us to come. We were all in the same timeshare meeting and we were like, yeah, this sounds great. We'll go for the change in humanity. Why not? But I think there is something to be said about leaning into our humanness that will hopefully pull us through whatever is coming.
Yeah, I think that personal human analog thing has been coming up for me so much too, and I think there is something coming, and like you said, we don't necessarily know what it is. I think it is some sort of a collective shift into something more hands-on and something that forces us to connect more and to see each other more, and I think there's something that does pull you through. Like if you think about it, if you're going through a tough time, what do? You watch TV, you listen to music, you look at art, you decorate your home with pieces of art that you enjoy. Like you're connecting with people without realizing it sometimes. I think we sometimes get detached from it when it's just on our phones and we're just listen to a playlist. We choose who we support with our energy and our money and our attention. I think that's sometimes we forget how much that is kind of our job as humans to bring hope to each other and that support and that collective humanity. So 2026 is turning out to be quite a banger, you know? I think number one, too, being a 1 year, I think is a big part of it. Like we're still getting rid of some stuff from the 9 year, but that you don't get to start something brand new without it being a bit of a challenge. And we just have to know that that's part of the process and that by the time we get to the 2 year, we'll start to maybe hopefully just feel more connected and more grounded in the new foundation.
Definitely. And I think if anyone might struggle with this energy, I would say look at your birth chart, kind of count up what planets are in which elements. Like if you have primarily water and earth, if you don't have a lot of air, if you don't have a lot of fire, it could be really scary. We have this feeling collectively, I think, of leaving the womb, leaving the den, leaving home, all of these things where you're like, I don't know what it is, but the cost of staying here and staying the same is too great. And you have to, like, at some point, you have to leave the womb and you have to take your first breath and get on with it. And so, any of us that love that fire energy of like, it's maybe an ADHD hyperfixation of like, get me all the supplies. Wait to start a new journal. We're going to start a new daytime or whatever the thing is, a new hobby. There's an excitement that comes with that. There's also sometimes I think a letdown of like, oh, it's harder than I thought it was, or I'm not as good instantly as I planned on being. And so I think if you can be aware that that might be some negative self-talk that comes up through any of this, like, yes, maybe we're going to, start over countries are going to start over with new governments. And it's like, great, this is exciting. And also, oh my God, this is so much more work than I expected. It's okay. We have some, not everybody has to carry the same load all the time, but the change has to come, and it's coming whether we want it to or not. Like, the horses are gonna run you over at this point.
Yeah, I get this vision of like, you know how like some animals are born and they just start running versus like humans, we take so long before we're able to do things by ourselves. I think we need to start embodying other species at this point and just being like, okay, yeah, we're out and we're running and we're just get on with it. Let's just do the thing. And yes, it's going to be hard, but we have to do it. And it's something that I think the more we can not try to fight it and again, not go back facing the wind, if we can just keep going with the momentum that we have, it's going to be a lot less work than trying to fight it or trying to get going. Like we said, after you stop, that's when you get stampeded. That's when you get run over, is when you stop in the middle of traffic. You know, if you're that person who is stopping in the middle of traffic without signaling or pulling over, then that's what's going to happen. You're going to get hit. I'm sorry to tell you. If you need a break, sure, pull over for a little bit, but stay in the car because you're still moving. You know, I think that's the main thing. Once you get out of that car, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be stuck.
I love the visual of like the zebra hitting the ground running. It's true, like the lions are coming. You either hit the ground and move with the herd, or you might be a snack. So, yeah, use this time before January 18th to 20th, somewhere in there. Like, use this brief window to seriously rest. Like, as tired as I think we all feel, I'm just leaning into that as much as possible to get extra sleep, to really be in the coziness of sustained Capricorn energy and winter, and reminding yourself that you don't have to go everywhere and be everything, because this is a marathon of a year. This is not a sprint. We are not going to be in and out of this lickety split. It's going to be a year. Makes my tummy hurt.
Yeah, it's not exactly a comforting energy, but I think like Emily was saying, like some of us really do want the change and we're like bring it on. So like if it means that you're a little bit slower to get going, that's okay too. But as long as you're still doing the planning and the dreaming and the, you know, setting yourself up, then yes, maybe it might take you till March. It might take you till a little bit longer into the year to get going, but I think the main thing is that we all just need to have that singular focus, that clarity. That's the main thing, is that that's what's going to keep you grounded. If you know where you're going, the journey is a little bit less scary if you know you're going towards something that's worthwhile. But if you have no idea where you're going or what you're doing, then yeah, of course, every single thing you're going to worry, like, this is the thing that's going to end me. But I have a feeling that the energy is going to not really give us a choice at certain points. There are going to be certain points where it's full steam ahead, whether we like it or not. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, I suppose, as always. But I think the more prepared we can be, the better.
I'm looking forward to that quiet window in June when we meet again and record for the second half of the year, because by then I think we will have a picture of where we're going. Like, there will be more clarity, and well, for sure, a lot of things will be in motion. So it'll be interesting to check in. I think this year will be transformational in so many ways.
I also want to add that Emily and I, we are not doing our usual PDF with all of the information for you, but we are both available if you do need some support, if you do need to check in. We have readings, we have offerings, and you can always reach out. I feel like that's what our journey is for the most part. That's why we show up in these episodes every month and for these more large scale episodes, is because that's part of our journey, is to be able to support you, give you a bit of a heads up and help support you. We're both earth signs, and I think that helps us for the most part because we do feel more grounded perhaps than most. And I think that's something that we really enjoy about this path, is getting to connect with you and getting to help you feel more confident and get more clarity on where you're going and what that journey might look like for you.
And don't forget, you can always, cop into Andrea's energetic recharges. I already ordered my 2026 full tarot numerology spread from her. You can join me in Cards and Cosmos each month. That will help kind of break down the energy into smaller bite-sized pieces. I always try to give my students and anyone in the membership just a more personalized version of what might be coming up for them directly. I also have a 2026 me, which is that exact same thing. Where are the planets moving? Because everybody's moving this year. What are going to be some new highlights for you over the next 7 to 20 years? Because this is a pivotal moment where directions and dreams and ideals and everything are going to change and look different. So please, please, please reach out. We love to support you in any way possible. And we'll be here each and every month as long as we keep feeling called to show up for these energetic recharges and cosmic energy reports, all of the things. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Spirit Crumbs. You can find me on Instagram for this podcast at Spirit Crumbs, or you can also find me at Concrete and Crystals for my own spiritual offerings and more tidbits about my own journey. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.